My parents bought my brother a house when he was 26 years old. Not a down payment. Not a cosign on a loan. Not a gift toward closing costs. A house. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a yard with a sprinkler system. In a neighborhood in Austin, Texas, where the median home price was $430,000. They paid cash. My father wrote a check the way other people write checks for groceries. With the quiet efficiency of a man doing an ordinary thing. I know the details because Daniel told me. With the innocent pride of someone who has never had to consider whether his good fortune might land differently on the people standing next to him. He called me from the driveway of his new house on a Tuesday afternoon and described the sprinkler system for 6 minutes. I was living at home at the time. I was 24. Working as a junior accountant at a firm downtown, paying my parents $900 a month to sleep in the bedroom I had grown up in, with the same desk and the same window, and the same view of the same backyard I had looked at my entire life. My mother had instituted the rent requirement when I moved back after college, citing, and I remember the exact phrasing because I have returned to it many times, the importance of financial responsibility. I paid every month, on the 1st, by bank transfer. I kept the records. I am an accountant. Keeping records is the one thing I have always done without being asked. What I could not account for. What sat in my ledger like an entry I couldn't reconcile was the gap between my brother's house and my rent receipt. Between the sprinkler system and the financial responsibility. Between what my family believed he deserved and what they believed I owed. I couldn't reconcile it for 4 years, and then a letter arrived. From a law firm I had never heard of, regarding a trust fund I did not know existed, and a decision made about me before I was old enough to make decisions about anything. Stay with me. This one takes time to tell, and every part of it matters. Subscribe if you're new, and if you have ever handed money to the people who are supposed to be handing it to you. This story is for you. My name is Sona. I'm 31 years old. I'm a CPA at a mid-size firm in Chicago, where I moved 18 months ago and where I have, for the first time in my adult life, a lease with only my name on it. I sign it every year with a feeling I can only describe as private victory. I grew up in Houston, Texas. My parents immigrated from Armenia in the early 90s, before I was born, with the particular combination of determination and financial anxiety that shapes immigrant families in ways their children spend decades understanding. My father built a commercial cleaning business from a single contract and 2 employees into something that, by the time I was in high school, employed 40 people and serviced office buildings across 3 counties. My mother kept the books, which is where I learned accounting, watching her at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and a calculator she still prefers to software. We were not wealthy when I was small. We became comfortable when I was in middle school and prosperous by the time I was in high school. In the way that businesses grow when the person running them works without stopping. My father worked without stopping. This is the truest thing I can say about him. My brother Daniel is 5 years older than me. He is broad-shouldered and easy and laughs from somewhere deep in his chest, and he has always moved through the world with the specific ease of a person who has never had reason to doubt that the world will accommodate him. I do not say this as criticism. It is simply an observation about the shape a person takes when they have never been told to be financially responsible, while the person beside them receives a house. The architecture of the inequality was familiar to me before I had language for it. The way a child learns the layout of a house before they can describe it. When Daniel was 17 and wanted a car, my parents bought him a used truck. Nothing extravagant, but reliable and his, free and clear. When I was 17 and wanted to drive, my parents suggested I save for a car and offered to match whatever I saved up to $1,000. I saved $1,200 over 18 months of babysitting and tutoring. They contributed the 1,000 EB. The car I bought was a 2003 Honda Civic with a check engine light that came on seasonally. I loved that car. I want to be clear about that. I was proud of it, proud of the saving, proud of the math. Gita. But I noticed the truck when Daniel attended college at a large state university in Texas. My parents paid his tuition, his housing, and provided him with a monthly stipend that he once described, without apparent awareness of the information he was sharing, as more than enough. When I attended a different state school 3 years later, my parents paid my tuition, this they did equally, but housing and living expenses were mine to manage. I worked at the university's financial aid office 20 hours a week, EP, which I later recognized as a setting of exquisite irony. I helped other students navigate funding they could not access while funding my own life with shifts I scheduled around exams. Easby. I did not resent Daniel for the stipend. I resented the silence around it. The way it was never acknowledged as a difference, never explained, never framed as a policy with a rationale. It simply was, the way gravity simply is. You don't explain gravity. It requires no justification. It is just the condition under which everything else operates. I was operating under a different gravitational condition, and no one thought it required explanation. After college, I moved home, which was practical, and also, I told myself, temporary. Hinton. My mother raised the rent question within 2 weeks of my return. $900 a month, she said, was fair for the market. She cited financial responsibility. She cited the importance of not becoming dependent, EBV. She cited several things that might have been persuasive if my brother had not, at that same period of his life, lived at home for 8 months, rent-free, before my parents helped him into his first apartment, which they also furnished. I paid the $900. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I was saving, and I was methodically, the way accountants save, in named accounts with projected timelines. I had a spreadsheet. I had goals. I had the financial responsibility my mother had cited in documented and measurable form. What I did not have was a house in Austin with a sprinkler system. The call came on a Tuesday. Evil. Daniel, standing in the driveway of his new house, describing the yard. I remember I was at my desk at the firm, and I put my headphones in so the colleagues around me would not see my face while he talked. He was happy, keep me. Genuinely, cleanly happy. That was the hardest part, not that he was gloating, but that it didn't occur to him that there was anything to gloat about. He was just sharing good news with his sister, Eb. I said the right things. I have always said the right things. I am very good at saying the right things while constructing, in a separate and parallel interior process, the exact accounting of what I am feeling. Keep one. That night, I sat with my spreadsheet and looked at the numbers for a long time. $900 a month. 24 months since college. $21,600 paid to sleep in my childhood bedroom. $430,000 house. Given. With a sprinkler system, the ledger did not balance. Ledgers that do not balance mean something is missing. I was an accountant, EP. I knew there was an entry I couldn't see. I did not confront my parents. I want to be honest about this. It is not something I'm proud of, exactly, but it is true. I did not walk into the kitchen and say, "You bought him a house, and you charge me rent, and I need you to explain this to me." I didn't, for several reasons. The first is that I am the daughter of Armenian immigrants who built something from nothing. And there is a particular texture of family loyalty in that context that makes direct confrontation feel like a betrayal of something larger than the specific grievance. The second is that I was 24 and still sleeping in my childhood bedroom, and the power differential was not abstract. The third, and this is the most honest reason, is that I was afraid of what the explanation might be, afraid it would confirm something I had been trying, for years, not to confirm, that the difference in how they treated us was not circumstantial, not structural, not the result of timing or resources or an old document, afraid it would simply be preference, afraid they would say, in words, or in the space between words, that they loved him differently, more fully, more instinctively, with less condition. I was not ready to know that. So I didn't ask. I moved out 14 months after the phone call about the house. I had saved enough for a deposit on an apartment in Houston's medical center area. A one-bedroom, third floor, B. A window that faced east and filled with light every morning in a way that made me feel unexpectedly like I had been let out of something. My mother helped me pack. She was warm that day, genuinely helpful, carrying boxes with efficiency and suggesting organizational systems for my kitchen. She seemed happy for me. I tried to receive her happiness as uncomplicated. Before I left, she handed me an envelope with $5,000 in it. For getting started, she said. I thanked her. I deposited it. I noted it in the spreadsheet. The gap between 5,000 cents and 430,000 is $425,000. I did not write that in the spreadsheet. I did the math in my head, and then I put it somewhere I could not look at directly. The way you learn not to look directly at certain things if you want to continue functioning. The letter arrived 2 years later. Me. I was in Chicago by then. I had transferred to the firm's Chicago office, a move that was professional and also honestly geographic. Distance is its own accounting strategy. From 1,000 miles, the ledger is less immediate. The letter was from a firm called Hargrove and Beale, and the attorney who signed it was named Patricia Oakes. It was addressed to me specifically, and it referenced a trust instrument established in 1988, 6 years before I was born, and it indicated that I was a named beneficiary of a trust established by my paternal grandfather, Armin Kashishian, and that the trust had reached a condition triggering mandatory disclosure to all named beneficiaries. My grandfather Armin died when I was 3. I have no memory of him. He exists for me as a photograph on my father's desk. A stern man in a dark jacket, standing very straight. The particular posture of someone who came from somewhere that required that kind of straightness. I read the letter 4 times. Then I called Patricia Oakes. What she told me, over the course of 40 minutes, rearranged the architecture of my entire childhood. My grandfather Armin had established the trust before immigrating. He had spent his final years in the United States restructuring it to comply with American law, working with Hargrove and Beale, and he had died before completing one final amendment he had apparently intended to make. The trust had 2 primary provisions. The first provision allocated the majority of the assets, approximately $2 million, grown from the original principal through 40 years of investment, to my father and his brother jointly, to be distributed upon both reaching the age of 60. My father was currently 58. The distribution had not yet occurred. This is why none of us had known. The money had been accumulating, out of view, managed by a trustee, who communicated only with my father and his brother as the named adult beneficiaries. The second provision was the one that concerned me directly. It was a directed distribution, a specific named bequest to the first female grandchild of Armin Kashishian, who demonstrates professional achievement in a financial discipline. The language was my grandfather's. Patricia Oakes told me he had dictated it himself, with particular emphasis on the word demonstrates, which he had apparently used to mean something specific. Not enrollment, not intention, but practice. A career, a credential. I was a CPA, I was the first female grandchild of Armin Kashishian. I was, as of the trust's evaluation, the only female grandchild who had entered a financial discipline professionally. The directed distribution was $380,000. It had been sitting in a trust account for 31 years, waiting for me to exist, and then to become what I had become without knowing anyone was watching. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time after the call ended. $380,000. The number sat in my chest, in a way that wasn't simply financial. It was structural, like a beam being placed in a building that had been waiting for it. It changed the load distribution of everything around it. But there was a layer beneath the relief. And the layer was not relief. It was a question that had been growing since the letter arrived, and that Patricia Oakes's explanation had not answered. My father knew about the trust. He had always known. He was a named beneficiary. He communicated with the trustee. He knew there was a directed provision for a female grandchild who entered a financial discipline, even. And he had watched me become a financial analyst, and then sit for the CPA exams at Passett, had attended the small dinner my mother made to celebrate. And he had said nothing. He had said nothing. And while he said nothing, he had charged me $900 a month. I called my father on a Thursday evening. I had waited 4 days, which is how long it took me to construct the conversation I wanted to have, rather than the one my first instinct would have produced. I told him I had heard from Hargrove and Beelble. I told him I had spoken with Patricia Oakes. I told him I understood the structure of the trust. There was a silence on the line, then he said, Sona, just my name, Heber. The way my grandfather must have said my father's name across some long distance when words ran out. I said, I need to understand why you didn't tell me. What followed was not a simple conversation, My father is not a simple man, and he does not speak simply about things that matter to him. He works in the language of gesture and labor, and presence. He has always shown up physically to the important moments of my life, always been there in the way a person is there when they love you and do not know how to say it. But words, particularly words about money, words about family and fairness, and the ancient architecture of an immigrant grandfather's decisions. Those words did not come easily, he told me, in pieces and across a long silence, this, He had not told me about the trust because he had not wanted me to shape my career around it. He had watched children make choices based on inheritance expectations and come out diminished by it, and he had wanted me to become what I became on my own terms, without the trust as either incentive or security, he believed. He said he believed, that the provision would mean more to me if it arrived, after I had already earned it by my own reckoning. I listened to all of this. I had my yellow legal pad in front of me, my mother's habit, inherited, and I took notes, which is what I do when I am receiving information I need to process before I respond. When he finished, I said, it seemed. Did the same reasoning apply to Daniel's house? The that followed was of a different quality. The house, it turned out, was also connected to the trust. Not to the directed provision, but to an earlier discretionary distribution my father had taken in advance of the primary allocation, with the trustee's approval, citing family need. He had used a portion of his anticipated share, distributed early, to purchase Daniel's house. My father had used money from the same trust, the trust that had a provision specifically written for me, to buy my brother a house, and had charged me rent in the interim. I want to be precise about what I felt, because precision is what I have. I felt the 4 years of $900 monthly transfers become something other than financial responsibility. I felt the sprinkler system take on a meaning Daniel had never intended when he described it for 6 minutes on a Tuesday afternoon. I felt 24 months of a spreadsheet named saving, getting out, arrange itself into a different kind of document. Evidence of a person navigating a system whose rules had been withheld from her. I did not cry. I made a note on my yellow legal pad, then I said, I need some time. My father said he understood. He said he was sorry in the way men of his generation say sorry. Not as an opening to further conversation, but as a door they have decided to install, which is not the same as walking through it. I said goodbye, and I sat at my kitchen table in Chicago for a very long time. I told my mother 3 days later. Not to recruit her to a side, I have no interest in sides, but because she is a bookkeeper, and bookkeepers deserve to have the complete record. My mother's response surprised me. Rita. She had known about the trust, had known for years, but she had not known about the directed provision for a female grandchild in a financial discipline. My father had apparently shared the existence of the trust with her, but not its full architecture. She had not known, specifically, that there was a provision with my name on it, waiting. She was quiet for a very long time after I told her. Then she said, "He always thought he was protecting you." I said, "From what?" She didn't answer immediately. And in the space of that non-answer, I understood something about my parents that I had not understood before. That my father's withholding was not malicious, and was not, at its root, about preference. It was about a philosophy of parenting, inherited from a man who stood very straight in photographs, and who believed that difficulty was formative and ease was corrosive, and that the best thing you could give a child was the chance to earn her own life. My grandfather Armin had written that provision demonstrates professional achievement, not because he didn't trust me, but because he did not want to trust me with the knowledge of it before I'd proven it to myself. My father had honored that spirit, imperfectly, selectively, with a blind spot the size of a house in Austin. He had given Daniel ease and given me the philosophy he had not seen, or had not allowed himself to see. The contradiction. I spoke to Daniel 2 weeks after the conversation with my father. I needed to be the one to tell him, because Daniel deserved to hear it from me, rather than in the fractured, second-hand way. Family information travels when people are managing their own discomfort with it. Daniel is not a complicated person, and I mean this as the highest compliment I can offer someone. He is direct and emotional, and he does not protect himself from information that asks something difficult of him. When I finished telling him, the trust, the provision, the directed distribution, the house, the rent, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Sona, I didn't know." I said, "I know you didn't." He said the house, not as a question, as a man locating, in real time, what the house had been paid with and what that meant in relationship to his sister, who had been paying rent in the next city. I watched him. We were on video. I could see his face. Work through the accounting. He is not an accountant, but he got there. He said, "What do you need from me?" I had thought about this before the call. I had made a note. I said, I need you to understand what it looked like from where I was standing. That's it. I'm not asking you to do anything with the house. I'm asking you to understand the view from my window. He said, "Tell me." So I told him. All of it. The truck and the Civic. The stipend and financial aid office. The $430,000 and the $900 a month. Ease. The $5,000 in an envelope versus the $380,000 in a trust account, with my name on it that nobody mentioned. He listened. He did not interrupt. When I finished, he said, "I'm sorry. I know that's not enough." It wasn't enough. But it was real, and real was what I needed. I accepted the distribution from the trust, $380,000, processed through Hargrove and Beale over the course of 2 months, arriving in an account I had opened specifically for this purpose. Clean, separate, a new ledger. I sat with it for a while before I did anything. This is a habit my grandfather would have approved of, I think. Sitting with money long enough to understand what it is before you decide what it's for. The first thing I did was close the spreadsheet named Savings. Getting out. I had maintained it for 6 years. The final entry was the opening balance of the new account. I felt, closing it, the way I imagine a long construction project feels when the last beam is placed. Not celebration exactly, but completion. The thing is built, it holds. I put $200,000 into a diversified portfolio. I purchased, with part of the remainder, a condominium in Chicago. My name on the deed, only mine, The closing was on a Friday morning in March, and the attorney slid the document across the table, and I signed it. And when I walked outside the building afterward, the light was very specific. The particular quality of early spring Chicago light, thin and determined. And I stood on the sidewalk for a moment and took a breath that went all the way down. I have a home. I own it. I bought it with money my grandfather set as the granddaughter who would enter a financial discipline and demonstrate it. He did not know my name when he wrote the provision. He did not know I was coming. Iba. But he made space for me in the architecture of his legacy, and I walked into it, and I am standing in it, and it holds. My relationship with my father is in reconstruction. This is the right word, not repair, Ibi, which implies returning to a previous state, but reconstruction, which means building something that accounts for the damage and incorporates it into the new structure. We talk more directly now than we ever have. Not easily. My father is not a man for whom direct conversation about feeling is natural or practiced, but more directly. He asks about condo. He asked, specifically, about the structural inspection, which made me laugh because it was the most him way to express that he cared about the foundation. He has not apologized in a comprehensive way, and I have stopped waiting for a comprehensive apology. What I have instead is a series of specific, partial acknowledgments, offered over time, that add up to something I can work with. He told me, in February, that he had been wrong to charge me rent. He did not say more than that. But he said it directly, looking at me, with the full weight of a man who does not say such things easily. I received it as the substantial thing it was. My mother and I have grown closer through this, which I did not anticipate. She is a woman who processes privately and speaks carefully, and in the months since the trust letter she has spoken with a candor I had not seen from her before. She told me, over the phone in October, that she had advocated for telling me about the trust when I passed my CPA exam and that my father had overruled her. I believe her. And I noticed that she had known and had not told me, even against her own preference. And I am holding that alongside her advocacy, both true simultaneously. I want to tell you something about my grandfather Armin, the man in the photograph with the straight posture and the dark jacket. He arrived in this country with almost nothing. He built something. He looked at the world around him and made decisions about what to protect and how to protect it. And one of those decisions was a provision for a female grandchild who would enter a financial discipline. In 1988, from a man from a culture that did not always make that provision, in an industry that did not always make room for her. He did not know me, but he knew what kind of woman he hoped would come after him. Eugene. I have thought about that provision a great deal since I learned of it. I have thought about what it meant that he wrote it, that he looked at the future and decided to reserve something specifically for a woman who would go into finance, who would demonstrate it, who would prove it by doing it, and not by being told. It was waiting for her. There is a kind of love in that provision that is different from the other kinds of love in my story. It is structural love. Forward-looking, load-bearing, designed to carry weight it cannot see yet. He built a room in his legacy and left the door open, and trusted that the right person would eventually walk through. I walked through. I wish I could tell him. Here is what I know now that I did not know at 24, sitting at a desk at a firm in Houston with headphones in, listening to my brother describe a sprinkler system. The ledger that doesn't balance usually means there is an entry you cannot see. Not that the math is wrong, not that you are miscounting or exaggerating or being oversensitive or failing to account for some reasonable explanation, a missing entry. Before you accept the explanation that you are the problem, that you are less deserving, less loved, less worth the investment, less entitled to the ease that others in your immediate vicinity seem to breathe without thinking. Look for the missing entry. It may be a trust fund. It may be a prenuptial agreement. It may be an old arrangement between people you've never met made before you existed, governing what flows where and why. It may be something less legible, a dynamic, a history, a wound in your family that became a policy, that became the condition under which you grew up. Whatever it is not a verdict on your worth. It is an entry. An entry that was there all along, in a file you weren't given access to. You were not miscounting. The ledger is real. The discrepancy is real. And you deserve to know the full accounting from the beginning. I am 31 years old. I own a condo in Chicago. I have a job I am good at, savings I built myself, and a new account that arrived with my grandfather's name on the wire transfer, and my name on the receiving end. I have a dog named Ledger, Insty, which my colleagues find funnier than I intended when I named him. I have a father who is learning, late and imperfectly, to say the things he should have said earlier. I have a mother who advocated for me in a room I wasn't in, and who I am only now learning to fully see. I have a brother who sat on a video call and asked me to tell him what the view looked like from my window, and who listened until I was finished. I have a yellow legal pad and a calculator I prefer to software, which I inherited from my mother without meaning to. The way we inherit the best parts of the people who made us even when those people have also hurt us. I have a grandfather I never knew who wrote my name into his legacy before he knew my name. I have, for the first time in my adult life, a home that no one can charge me rent for. It is enough. It is more than enough. It is finally the accounting I was owed. If this story found you, if you have a spreadsheet, if you have a ledger that never balanced, if you have spent years examining yourself for the flaw that explains why someone else received the house, I want you to hear this. Look for the missing entry. Not with anger, though anger is allowed, with the precision of someone who knows that numbers do not lie, and that a ledger that doesn't balance means something is hidden, and that you deserve to see it. Suskither, if you're new. Share this with someone who has been paying rent in a house that was supposed to be home. Leave a comment. I read everyone. And if you have ever sat in a parking garage after a family meeting and done math in your head that made your chest hurt, you already know what I know. You were not imagining it. You were accounting.